Here. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody here to CIM University #2, our second installment. Thank you guys for joining us here tonight. The title of tonight's CIM University is Fueling on Your Run, a very important topic. My name is Scott Abbott. I am the Executive Director of the Sacramento Running Association. We are the organization that puts on the California International Marathon. We take great pride in making sure that CIM is a true platform for achievement for all runners and all achievement types. Whether you're trying to run your first or your fastest, it's important for CIM to be that true platform for achievement. And we really feel like the CIM University is a valuable resource to help you in that preparation on your road to CIM so that you can take full advantage of that platform that we try to create for you on the streets of Sacramento in December. And tonight's topic, fueling your run, is an absolutely critical topic. So kudos to all of you guys for being here tonight. This is such an important topic in terms of your preparation of all the things that you have control over in ensuring your opportunity to be successful. This might be the most important one. So, and we've got, to that note, we've got an outstanding panel here tonight that is going to help educate you on these topics. You know, we work with best-in-class partners in this area. We're proud to, as a race, have best-in-class partners: GU Energy Labs, Nuun Hydration, and Raley's Markets. And these panelists are all accomplished sports dietitians, and they have tons of experience working with athletes of all kinds, endurance athletes, and they've prepared athletes specifically for CIM, and they've worked really closely with our race to make sure that CIM has all the products and services from a nutrition and hydration standpoint to really create optimal fueling and hydration solutions for all of our participants. We're going to start with a really general conversation about diet and nutrition as it's related to marathon training. And then we'll get a little bit more specific into the types of things that you can be doing in your training runs and to help you on race day. And then ultimately on race day, executing a good fueling and hydration plan for you to be successful and achieve your goals in the marathon at CIM. And then obviously we'll allow time at the end for questions. So with that, we'd like to dive in and get going here. I'm going to introduce our, as I said, expert panel from our best-in-class partners here. We're going to start with Roxanne Vogel with GU Energy Labs. Roxanne, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Roxanne. I work for GU Energy Labs. I work in research and development, so I'm the Nutrition and Performance Research Manager, which essentially means I get to help develop products. I work with our athletes on their fueling and nutrition for races, and I also run our performance lab, which is our physiology testing unit, so that we can test out all of the products that we create for athletes. I'm a runner myself, so I do understand kind of the needs of the sport, and actually just ran my first marathon in over a decade earlier this year at Austin, so I could qualify for the Boston Marathon, but excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Roxanne. And congratulations on your Boston qualifier at Austin. Next up, Yvette Waters with Raley's Market.
Yeah, thank you everybody for having me. Thank you, Scott, for inviting me as well. I'm Yvette Waters, nutrition strategist and brand influencer for all of Raley's companies. I'm the corporate registered dietitian is basically what that means. I am a sports dietitian and have my focus in performance, but working in the retail space, overseeing all in-store and e-commerce activations, internal, external educations, any type of touch points when it comes to health and wellness for our customers and our team members. So thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks, Yvette. And then finally, Vishal Patel with Nuun Hydration.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Scott, for having us again. I'm Vishal Patel. I'm the Director of Product Development for Nuun. So Nuun Hydration and At Nuun, I'm essentially in charge of R&D and innovation. I am also a runner myself, so like the rest of the panel, understand the demands, and excited also to be running with all of you down there. So I'll be running CIM again this year in December. It's been a while since I've been back down in Sacramento, so I'm excited to talk today and then get down to race day.
Thank you, Vishal, and appreciate you being with us and the entire panel. And like I said, these are best in class partners that we have and longtime partners in GU, Nuun, and Raley's, and they are a big part of providing us with great resources to the runners at the event for you guys to be as successful as possible at CIM. So let's dive in a little bit here and talk about this important topic of fueling and hydration as it relates to marathon training. And let's start really generally and just talk about, obviously everybody's heavy into their training at this point. Just about 10 weeks out now from the marathon. I think I just created a lot of anxiety amongst the people on this call, but as they're in that heavy marathon training, what are some types of things? We'll start with you, Yvette, really that they should be doing from a general standpoint in terms of fueling just day-to-day optimally to really fuel them as they pursue these heavy weeks of training.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting to hear that's already 10 weeks out. So basically, I was going to say start at 10 weeks out. So literally start now. And there's a couple rules of thumb, right? Main goal is your training. You're already training really hard, but it's also nutrition. The nutrition preparation is going to be crucial, and it is going to be individualized to you. So I'm going to give some kind of like general tips. And I would say first, to really kind of set you up for success and preparation is do your homework. So preparing the basics, understanding what's provided at the stations when it comes to the fueling offerings. That gives you a really good understanding, and you can start to build your nutrition plan. Really think of this as a kind of calculated effort. And in that, also kind of see what the weather is going to be. I know we don't know for sure, but likely going to be will influence the nutrition of it too. And then also start practicing now, start to really figure out exactly what works, because it's going to really help your body understand what it's going to tolerate. And then kind of building up that race plan. So I would recommend not to do a diet carouseling, and kind of experimenting closer to, I would say, start to kind of figure it out a little bit now. And a lot of times I get asked about macronutrients. So we're talking carbs, protein, fat. Especially for an endurance athlete, your main focus is you want to fuel. So you want to have those storage, you want to have those glycogen stores, and then you want to continually reload those glycogen stores. So think carbs first. So about 45 to 65% of your calories coming from carbohydrates. So carbohydrate rich meals. Then think moderate protein. So about 15 to 30% of your calories coming from protein, because that's what's going to recover and rebuild your muscles and really everything in your body. And then fat. So then think about 15 to 30% of calories coming from fat. When we're thinking of fat, think of kind of the olive oils, the nuts, the seeds, the fatty fishes, things that are a little bit more anti-inflammatory, because your body is in a very, very inflammatory state, constantly training, constantly running, having a lot of oxidative stress there. So this food is going to help kind of do anti-inflammatory. So keeping you nice and balanced. Those are kind of the general overviews of figuring out carb rich, moderate protein, lower fat, and then see what your body tolerates and go from there. Don't experiment even 2 weeks before. I would start experimenting now, hone in the next few weeks.
That's great, Yvette. And I know there's so much general information out there, and you talked about diet carouseling, and there's so many fads out there and different pathways, and some of them are valid and others maybe not. But again, we're focusing on runners that are doing something very specific. They're preparing their body, to train and fuel for training, but then also recover from training as well. And I'm here taking notes, and I hope many of you are too. I got 45 to 65% of carbs 15 to 30% of your calories coming from protein, and then 15 to 30% coming from fat. That's kind of the macro. Is there, what would a sample meal, in training sort of look like? What should a plate look like, Yvette, just staying with you, related to those carbs? What will kind of be that magic meal?
Yeah, I think I was prepared for this question, kind of, sort of. It's individualized, right? So it's what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for the other. But for these next few weeks leading up, when I say carb rich, think of kind of the more whole carb type of aspects, the richer carb type of aspects, the whole grains, the fruits, the vegetables, things that capacity. Having a lot of fruits and vegetables, about half your plate, fruits and vegetables, will give you those vitamins, those minerals, those antioxidants that you're needing for these weeks leading up. Then about a quarter of your plate should be kind of the leaner proteins, kind of the poultries in there, the leaner. You can have red meat, absolutely, but not necessarily as fattier cuts. And then the wholer grains, as you're kind of getting closer to the race days and things like that, that's where you're going to start to decrease your fiber a little bit. So you're going to go a little bit more carb rich, but not as high in fiber. And then keeping together with the lean protein kind of things, but your vegetables kind of staying away from the cruciferous vegetables a little bit more. The cauliflower, the cabbage, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, maybe just lower those a couple weeks before. The beans, the legumes, kind of lower those a little bit before the race, a couple weeks before. Those can just cause some digestive issues. And then a little bit more, and then I would lower a little bit more on dairy too. That just really allows for your body to feel energized, nice, clean, and kind of ready to go.
Nice. I don't have any problem with lowering my broccoli, cauliflower intake. So
Only in this time.
You heard it from Yvette. We can do that. No, that's excellent. I think that helps kind of frame some of that stuff in terms of how we should be eating for fueling. And again, I think a lot of times diets are focused sometimes on weight loss or other things. And really what we're trying to do during this time period is fuel our body for training and trying to do something at a very high level from a performance standpoint. And sometimes some of the diet information out there is not as targeted at that. And I think, kind of those key, hitting all those macronutrients to fuel the body effectively so that you can train effectively for this race. Now, Vishal, how does hydration kind of fit into that, equation a little bit? Just general hydration throughout the day, and as they're kind of training, even through training, before training, after training, how much water and other fluids should people be drinking?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think like from a day-to-day standpoint, like hydration in terms of like, general pre, during, after a race, I think generally throughout the day it's the most important, because you want to be, not just going into your workouts and the race day well hydrated, but just, be well hydrated, regardless of what you're doing. We know that if you're drinking fluid, if you're replenishing electrolytes and things of that nature, it's gonna give you a little bit more energy. It can help the foods that you're eating absorb a little bit better too. From a general rule of thumb, because like we heard, it is a little bit individualized. One quick calculation that we allow people to do is to just take your weight in pounds, divide that by 2, and the number of ounces you get from there is just a starting point. I mean, again, that's runners have a different demand than even cyclists or even other types of sports that we look at, and typically marathon runners tend to sweat the most and lose the most electrolytes as well. And we'll get into a little bit more, I know, later in the talk on actual like hydration before, during, after, but knowing that your body is just going to lose naturally more fluid, naturally more electrolytes than other sports and activities, it's really important with your meals to ensure that you're drinking water, that when you're exercising or before and after, to add the electrolytes in there, because it's going to help you absorb the fluid and then also just help replenish what you're losing as well.
All right, that's interesting. I never heard that one before. So, if I weigh 160 pounds, that would be half of that would be 80. So 80 ounces of water throughout the day is just kind of a rule of thumb. Is that
Right,
correct?
yeah.
Am I hearing that right? Yep.
Yeah. And then, you want to adjust more, as training is increasing. If it's really hot and you've noticed that you're sweating a little bit more, adding more, electrolytes, or just increasing the volume is really important. And it's pretty straightforward to monitor your hydration status. There are a lot of sophisticated sensors and testing out there that are available as well, but really looking at your urine color throughout the day is a great kind of just general status update of how I'm doing. You want to shoot for something around like a pale yellow, almost like a lemonade color, and too clear, you're not absorbing any of the water that you're consuming, and you need electrolytes. And if it's too yellow or concentrated, then you're just not drinking enough, and we want to focus in on that consumption.
We knew we'd get to start talking about urine color, and that you've really hit it.
Yeah, always
peaked out in your nutrition and hydration talk when you start talking urine colors. So thank you, Vishal. Roxanne, let's move on to you. Maybe what you could talk a little bit about is what are some of the products that are out there, or other tricks and tips to working around the workouts themselves and getting some of these nutrients in training, either right before, during, and maybe more importantly, talk a little bit about recovery and what you should be putting in your body, within that magic window of a half hour to an hour just after you run.
Yeah, always a great topic for me to cover. I work in this field, and I work with a lot of people on different fueling strategies. So whether it's going for a gel, or whether it's using a chew, or, waffles, solid things, or even a sports drink, it all works. It's just a matter of making sure you get those calories in and doing it consistently. So what I mean by that is you want to come into a workout or a race, you already want to be topped off on your glycogen stores. So like Yvette was saying, like your diet should be rich in carbohydrate just day to day to make sure that you have enough glycogen stores in your muscles and in your liver to fuel whatever run you're going to be doing. But on top of that, you're also going to be depleting those glycogen stores while you're out there running. So you want to start to replenish them while you're on the go. So workouts that are generally over an hour or over an hour and a half, you want to be fueling during. So that could be, again, like a sports drink. It could include gels, any of the little chews that you might find on the markets. The magic number you want to target is maybe about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour of exercise once you've hit that threshold of about an hour. And that's not to say that you should start fueling at an hour. It just means that if you're working out for longer than that, or if that's your plan for your long run, then you should go into it with that mindset that you want to get 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour in. So you want to start well fueled, whether that's you had breakfast in the morning, or you had a small carbohydrate rich snack of maybe an hour or two before you start your run. So definitely take care of that first. But then while you're out there, make sure you bring enough calories with you. So when I say 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates, that could be anywhere in the range of like 100 to 200, maybe 250 calories per hour. So to put that into context, one gel, for instance, is about 100 calories. So if you're thinking in terms of calories, maybe you want to bring a couple of gels, maybe 3 per hour to cover your bases for how long you're out there. And so it's also important that while you're getting in the carbohydrates and the gels or the chews or whatever you're choosing to fuel your run with, you definitely want to wash it down with fluids. So a lot of people make that mistake right off the bat. The first time maybe they've tried fueling with a gel, they don't take any water and they wonder why it's not sitting so well later on in the run or the race. Definitely you want to take it with some fluids. So make sure you bring a bottle or you have access to water on your route. Aside from that, I would say, practice your strategy. well in advance. Make sure you know not only what types of fuel you're going to be using, whether that's gels or chews or drink mix, but also how you're going to carry it. If you're planning on relying on the aid stations, know how far they're spaced, which for this race is about every 6 miles. Know which flavors you're going to have on course, because maybe you won't enjoy those flavors. So you need to bring your own flavors with you that you do like, or your own products or your own brands.
You'll be the first to hear those flavors. But let's talk recovery real quick, just because in training, before we dive into the race itself, as they finish these long runs, as they finish key workouts and runs, Yvette, what are the key pieces they're looking for like recovery products, or I shouldn't say products, but what are those macronutrients that are important on the recovery side of things?
Yeah, when it comes to recovery, I mean, you already hit the hours or the special time of 30 to 60 minutes. So after your long runs,
that was just a guess. I'm glad you're
great guess. Great guess. Within 60 minutes after your run, it's really important to refuel yourself. To everyone's point, obviously hydration is crucial. I'm gonna let the expert speak to that portion of how much and everything with the recovery thing, but I would say it's really important to get protein in there. And sometimes people aren't very hungry after a long run. I know that I don't tend to be the hungriest after a long run or a soccer tournament, but if you do have a shake or a smoothie, something that's a little bit easier digestively, to be able to get the protein in there, at least around, kind of shoot for about 20 to 30 grams of protein too. It might sound like a lot, but you've already depleted your body so much. And what that protein is going to do is to start to rebuild and recover your muscles right away. That's really in that 60-minute time frame. That's the most efficient time that protein source is going to get into your body, into your bloodstream, and really start to kind of do its magic. And then it's really just refueling and re-energizing with carbohydrates again. We talk a lot about that, but there's definitely a reason your body's depleted by that point. It's been working really hard. So it's just kind of getting in those calmer, easier carbohydrates, usually something that tastes a little sweet, goes down a little bit easier for folks. And that way you're refueling and replenishing the energy stores, but you're also already repairing. And another thing, especially for recovery, and it's not food related, is really sleep. And stress. I know that sounds like not what you kind of would expect, but sleep is where you're going to get your recovery, and it's going to be crucial through these next weeks and stuff like that, to really try and get really quality sleep, because that's when a lot of work is going to be done too. And one suggestion I do is kind of look for a slower releasing protein during that time. This is the time where I like to do cottage cheese a little bit before, or a little bit of a Greek yogurt before I'm going to bed, because through the night, it is going to be releasing protein into the body and recovering as you're sleeping too. There's whey, and then there's casein that's in those type of products, and whey gets into your body very quickly as protein. Casein takes a longer time. So finding those kind of slower releasing proteins and having a little protein rich snack before you go to bed is also going to help recover too.
Great. So we got these macronutrients through training, our carbs, protein, and fat. You've put out a great plate for us. We've done a good job of really identifying the things we need from a hydration standpoint. Those, half your body weight in ounces throughout the day from a hydration standpoint. And then those really finding those simple carbs as a way to fuel before and during, and then the protein, 20 to 30 grams of protein after, really starts to generate that recovery. And then obviously sleep, really drives a lot of that body repair that happens. So good. That essentially that could be our guidepost as we get through training. Now we're looking at the race itself. Let's talk about that fueling and hydration plan that we want to put together on race day, that we can kind of start practicing now in our long runs. And Roxanne, you already kind of touched on this a little bit by talking about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour, the 100 to 250 calories per hour, getting a lot of that through gels, potentially supplementing that with hydration, sport drink product. this is a good time to, I think, talk about what we have on course at CIM so you guys can start preparing. There are 17 aid stations on course. Those aid stations will be roughly every mile to about 1.5 miles to 2 miles. And then as you get to the end of the race in those final 6 miles, they'll be every mile. Those are actually the locations of those and the distances of each of those are up on our website, onruncim.org. We're going to try to share screen right now and potentially show you that list. At every aid station on course, nuun will be provided, and it is nuun. Here it is there. What is provided is lemon lime flavored nuun endurance. And Vishal, maybe you could talk briefly about what nuun endurance is, because maybe people have tried nuun products, but actually specifically what nuun endurance is and why that is optimal as far as our combining a little bit of fueling with the hydration.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think people are familiar with our I can't believe I don't have a tube in front of me. Are familiar with our nuun sport line, our effervescent tablets, which are in the tube, which is great solution for replenishing your electrolytes, getting the hydration that you need for kind of general exercises and shorter runs. We've designed nuun endurance to be kind of optimized for marathon runners and endurance athletes. So it's got when you're for hydration just in general, a combination of carbohydrates, so glucose, and electrolytes with water will help your body absorb fluid a lot better. You don't need high amounts of sugar and carbs all the time to hydrate. So that's why we have our sport line, which is more geared towards, just having the right mix of glucose to help your body absorb fluid more rapidly. Our endurance line, is meant for when you're exercising above like 90 minutes, we find that your body just needs more. So it's got a little bit more carbohydrates in there and a little bit more electrolytes. The carbs and the electrolytes, again, are helping you absorb the fluid. They're the additional carbs you'll get from GU and that Roxanne will talk about, that's going to be your primary fueling source. But our endurance drink mix will provide a little bit of calories and some carbs to help with that hydration, during those longer efforts, during those more high intensity. So practicing using it right now would be my number one tip in your long runs and as you're training.
Great. Yeah. And that nuun endurance has, about 19, maybe between 15 and 20 calories per like that 4-ounce cups that's going to be at the aid station. So again, if you're trying to get, as you said, maybe 20 to 30 ounces an hour while you're running, and we have 17 aid stations, that's going to be taken, basically a cup or so at every aid station along the way. And, every, because you're going to have an aid station every, 15 to 20 minutes along the way. And then that'll get you close to that 20 to 30 ounces per hour. Yeah. 16 to 20 is per ounce. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Start around like 16-ish. Okay. And then you can adjust there, like, keep an eye on the weather and things like that, just to ensure that you're getting in the right amount of fluid. Great. And then, there's a small amount of calorie in there. But really, as you said, now we'll kind of shift to Roxanne here. The primary amount of your fueling is going to come from, the hydration is going to come from nuun. You get a little bit of boost. They've got some calories in that nuun endurance project, but to get that, as you said, 150, 250 calories an hour. You mentioned, if we can get back potentially to the list of aid stations, we talked about the 17 aid stations. There are 4 aid stations on course. As you mentioned earlier, they're separated by about 6 miles. The first one is at mile 6.4. You can see aid station there, 3. The next one is going to be at mile 12, or aid station 6, and then mile 10, mile 17.9, that's aid station 10. And then finally at miles 23.5, So just about every 6 miles, as you said, Roxanne, that is going to where we'll have fuel products from GOO.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, each of the gels, again, is 100 calories per little packet. They are going to vary in different sodium content. So anything that says salted, such as salted watermelon, is going to have a slightly higher sodium content. So 125 milligrams per packet. And our lemonade Roctane, which is another one of the flavors, one of my personal favorites, actually, is one of our very high sodium, relatively high sodium gel. So it's got about 180 milligrams per packet. So just to give you an idea of what's out there. And then vanilla bean is probably one of our top selling flavors of all time and just an all around favorite. So just something nice and easy to go down. But I would definitely recommend, if you plan on relying on the aid stations, do try to test out those flavors ahead of time. And then as far as the chews, those are going to be about 90 calories per serving and about 21 to 23 grams of carbohydrates, similar to our gels. So not too much difference there as far as nutritional value that you're getting from them. They're just going to be a slightly, more chewier, obviously, texture. Some people do prefer those, or at least like to mix it up by having those periodically in there. And then the salted lime, again, is going to have a slightly higher sodium content than the strawberry. So salted lime's got about 125 milligrams per serving of sodium. The best way to go about it is to try and kind of consistently sip and nibble, I like to say, throughout your race. So maybe every 15, 20 minutes, either be drinking something or be taking a gel or doing some chews. But you should be really thinking about consistently, at least every 20 to 30 minutes, getting some calories in to try and get those goals of about 150 to 250 calories or 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates. So what does that look like? Could be like 2 to 3 gels or 2 to 3 servings of chews per hour, or a couple of gels and doing the nuun endurance fuel on top of that should get you to those targets.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a lot more, I think, than people realize. And I think that's why it's important to start practicing now. And also, I think, talk a little bit maybe about, you kind of said that sip and nibble as you go, the importance of it, doing it early. Because, if you're waiting till you're hungry, or you wait till you start bonking and then trying to back fill with fuel, that can be a challenge. Maybe talk a little bit about the timing of that. I think sometimes people are afraid to start early. Maybe that first aid station, they feel great. Why do I need to take a gel? Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a lot of people, maybe they had breakfast. So again, they're not feeling very hungry right off the bat, or maybe they just have some pre-race jitters and they don't necessarily feel like eating anything. But yeah, it is definitely important to fuel early as well as fueling often. So you want to start kind of early on. I would say within the first 30 minutes, definitely you should be having some sort of nutrition going in during your race. So whether that's the drink mix, whether that's getting a gel and taking that, you do want to have something starting to go in within that first 30 minutes. And oftentimes I will actually recommend people, even if they've had a breakfast, say 2 or 3 hours before the actual race start time, maybe while you're standing there getting warmed up, be sipping on some sports drink, some of the nuun endurance fuel, or even take a gel maybe 15 minutes before you start the race, just to make sure that you've got your blood sugar levels kind of up and running and that you're ready to go when the gun goes off. So yep, fuel early, fuel often, sip and nibble. So every at least 20 minutes, you should be eating or drinking something, and just make sure you keep up with your nutrition. So don't get behind to start with, but then just maintain it throughout.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that can kind of segue us into talking about the morning of and really kind of practicing. And it's important to kind of think about the race a little bit in that respect. That you can't quite emulate as much during training. A lot of time in training, we're just kind of setting our alarm, rolling out of bed, maybe having a quick something to eat, and then we're out the door and we're running within, a half hour or so. Whereas, at the race, we're talking about a 7 a.m. start time. That means getting on the bus at, 5 o'clock. That means probably leaving your hotel room at, maybe 4 o'clock, and I'm already creating a bunch of anxiety here for everybody, I'm sure. And then that might be an alarm at 3:30. Setting the alarm at 3:30. So if you're maybe eating something at the hotel, a bagel, or when you leave the house, that could be 4 o'clock. The race isn't starting until 7. So I think Roxanne, you make a great point about, kind of topping yourself off with a gel or something in that start area so that you're not starting the race with an empty tank. But that kind of segues us a little bit to Yvette. Maybe talk a little bit about what are those types of things you should be doing that morning to make sure you're fueled properly, and that they can maybe use pieces of that in the mornings before their long runs during training.
Well, after you just started a bunch of anxiety, I'm so happy.
Yeah, I know. 3:30 alarm. Yeah, right.
To your point, it is important to have a carb-rich breakfast before, and usually actually well before. So whether you're in your hotel room or you're getting ready to go, they say about 3 to 4 hours before having a regular meal. That sounds super early. So 2.5 to 4 hours before having a good, rich, carbohydrate rich breakfast. And even though you've been kind of training leading up to it, I would practice that time and practice that breakfast coming up at least probably a week ahead of time. So your body is used to it. It's used to the timing and it's ready to go. That really helps to allow for the body to just be that well-oiled machine that you're kind of looking for. And then when it comes to it, just see the type of breakfast that you're interested in. Everybody eats very different breakfasts. Maybe it is a bagel and a cup of coffee. Maybe it is oatmeal or waffles with syrup. Maybe it's just a bowl of rice if you're needing something super, super just bland, but easy on the stomach. Figuring out what's going to work for you right before getting that ready to go. And then obviously having the hydration and to Roxanne's point, absolutely topping off right before the race is going to help with those glycogen stores. And it has been found that eating that kind of carb rich, lower fiber type of breakfast can help to delay the point of which you may bonk. So it is important to do, what you're aiming for at your breakfast, aim for about 100 grams of carbohydrates. That's going to kind of help give you an idea of what to go for when it comes to the carbohydrate aspect of things. Low fat, low fiber, low protein. And that's going to kind of get you more ready to go for that race time.
So now backing that up a little bit, what about going into the night before and the day before? What are the things that they should be doing, the weekend of the race, and then also that they can implement now in their training to kind of prep their body for that? What's that magic pre-race dinner? I know historically it's, hey, carbo load, have a bowl of pasta. But what are those pieces? Should protein be in there? How much fat, and also looking back, not just the night before, but all day or maybe the couple days leading up, what are those things they should be doing? Yvette, you can probably just stay with you on that.
Yeah, good point. When it comes to the carb load and the night before the pasta dinner, as much as we love it, I'm sorry to say, but that is not the recommendation anymore. It's about, I would say about 5 days before the race, you want to gradually increase your carbs because you don't want to start heavy and too much, eating just too much the night before. You already got a lot of jitters going on and stuff like that. Eating too heavy can cause GI disturbances. It can also cause sleep disturbances. It messes with the blood sugar levels. And it's just better to kind of gradually do it. So I'd say the magic number is about 5 days before. I would say when it comes to really hone in on your dinner the next few weeks and then practice that dinner a couple times a week. Again, it's very calculated right now, but your body's doing a lot of work. So the nutrition needs to be calculated. For our folks who are traveling in, I do recommend doing some research ahead of time. Make a reservation at a place where has good food, see what the menu is offering. If you do want to, or if you have the time and capacity to, I would even practice the meal that you're wanting to order just to make sure that your body is feeling it and it can tolerate it. So really plan ahead, get all of your snacks and your breakfast beforehand if you're traveling and have that ready to go in your hotel room. So you're not scrambling around and trying to just grab something quick, grab something fast food related that can kind of, that then you're kind of stuck and you're already doing the recovery aspect of things. So I would say it's again, making that plan, being consistent with it, doing your research, figuring out what your body can tolerate, and just gradually doing the carbohydrate loading before. And that's really going to help those glycogen storage.
Awesome. All right. Well, you blew up my all the history that I've had having my bowl of pasta the night before a race. So, and that's maybe why I've underperformed all these years. Now there's a new day, 5 days before. Vishal, I want you to hit on something real quick before we dive into some questions about hydration. To that point for Yvette, like what's the hydration look like, in those kind of critical days, 48 hours, and even the morning of? It's kind of a two-part thing I'd like you to talk about that, but then also talk about the factor of that potentially this is going to be a cooler morning and a cooler day, in December, and the importance of hydrating maybe when you don't feel like you need to because you're not thirsty because it's not hot.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Maybe I'll start with that question. I mean, I get that a lot. As the temperature changes and we're getting to more kind of traditional winter training, when the environmental temperature drops and we're still exercising, your core temperature is still going to rise. So, your body is still going to heat up, and that is going to require your body to naturally cool itself off, which is, it does that via sweating. So you're still, even though the air temperature may not be as warm, your body's core temperature will rise. It's going to get to those levels where it's going to need to cool itself down. And naturally you can do that via sweating, which we can't really control, but the hydration in that aspect will help with that as well. So I wouldn't, change anything on race day. Like, stick to the amount of fluids that's typically recommended, which is around start with 16 ounces and adjust from there. Don't go too far below or too far above. Usually we tend to recommend increasing as it gets warmer. Or if on race day it's really hot, humid, etc. But cooler temperatures, I know it may not seem natural, but again, just note that as you progress in the race, as the day goes, it's going to get warmer, and your core temperature kind of will rise, requiring you to cool itself down. And hydration is a great way to do that. As far as, leading up to the race, like the 48 hours before, we don't, what I hope you don't do is start chugging a bunch of like nuun or water or anything like that, right? Like we want that consistent fluid intake is going to be the most important. Typically the couple days before, topping off on the electrolytes are going to be pretty important, because you're going to sweat more. The electrolytes are just going to help prepare you for the race and just make sure that you're well hydrated going in. So this is where, our nuun sport tablets come into play, where they're really low in sugar and calories and just provide the electrolytes you need to kind of just top that off. So maybe add one additional serving or 16 more ounces a couple days before, but really we're not trying to change much. We're trying to just use the training that you've done and use the hydration practices we've been harping all this time.
Great. This has been just awesome information, and we're going to get to some of these questions that are in the chat, and this is a good time if you do have some questions, you can drop them into the chat. I just want to recap a few things for everybody before we dive into these questions. This has been such great information. Reminder, 17 aid stations on course. They're every 1.5 miles to 2 miles early in the race, and then they're about every mile as we get near the end of the race. There are 4 at all of those aid stations. We will have nuun and water at all of those stations. The nuun will be in nuun cups. The water will be in generic cups. Quick note about nuun endurance. I don't think Vishal said this. Nuun endurance is a clear product. So you have to be careful to know that, if it's in a nuun cup, it is nuun. It's not water. So because both items are clear. So that's just important to remember that piece. If it's in a nuun cup, that's nuun endurance. And then we'll also have water at all those stations. And then, as Roxanne said, there will be 4 stations on course every 6 miles that'll have fueling products from GU. There'll be both gel. We'll also have some chopped up fruit, courtesy of Raley's, at all of those stops as well. So if you have trouble getting in gels and chews, there's also fruit, which will get you maybe 15 to 20 calories as well from like a half a piece of fruit. So if you're trying to just supplement because you're having a hard time getting some of those other products down. So that's the way to kind of get to those magic numbers, 150 to 250 calories an hour, as Roxanne laid out, and 16 to 20 ounces of fluid an hour during the race. And so that's basically, a gel every half hour, and, taking those 4 ounces of fluid at every aid station. That's going to kind of get you pretty close to that. So that's just recapping some things. Practice those on the long run. Don't try to do anything new on race day. One great spot where you're able to practice this is if you are in the Northern California area. We encourage everybody to come out to the Run the Parkway event in November. That is a 20-mile-and-a-half marathon race that we put on. That is the official training run of CIM. We're going to have all of these products out there. All of the aid stations will mimic the aid stations at CIM. So that's a great way to kind of practice that fueling and hydration plan for your last key long run there in early November. So if you haven't signed up for that event, you should sign up for that, because it's a great chance to practice these things. Now let's dive into some of these questions that we've got here. We had a question, guys, about this probably be more for you, Vishal. They're talking about weight before and after a long run, like kind of weighing yourself before and after a long run to monitoring your hydration needs.
Yeah, I mean that that's kind of been an almost like a general tried and true method to understand how much fluid your body is losing, and that is a recommendation or like a tip you can do just to ensure that you're dialing in how much you're drinking. The one caveat to that is if you are using that as a metric or a measurement for how much you're losing, you want to kind of repeat it every season at least, or as your training is progressing, because at times as your fitness increases, your body could get a little bit more efficient and it may not sweat as much. But if you are doing if you want to just get a baseline, weighing yourself, before a run, go for a run for about an hour, medium intensity, nothing too hard, and then weigh yourself after. The difference, you would want to shoot for half of that in ounces. So if you lost 2 pounds, you want to shoot for 16 ounces. That's usually the rule of thumb there.
Great. And then a question just about logistics. If you were going to carry fluids, it sounds like, is it better to carry water and then use the nuun endurance on course, or vice versa, carry the sport drink and then use water on course? Of the two, is there a preferable, one of those two?
Yeah, I mean, both can work and are good options. I think carrying the nuun with you would probably be a better solution, because we want you to get electrolytes and those little bit of carbs in there as much as you can, because it's going to help with the hydration. You'll be able to find water very easily too, as well as nuun. So typically for me, I mean, I will sometimes at an aid station grab water just because sometimes you just want water, and that's perfectly fine. And you can take that. Don't worry. I'm like, oh, I didn't get any electrolytes. You'll get plenty from the gels and things of that nature. So if you're carrying something, maybe a different flavor or something that you like of nuun, stick with that, and then grab the water as needed while you're out there on race day.
Actually, staying with you, Vishal, it sounds like there's need. Eric is asking for a little clarity over that pre-race hydration in the chat here. You were saying 48 hours before the race to top off of the electrolytes, and you mentioned 16 ounces. And so I think just clarify that schedule before the race in terms of how much electrolyte you want to be getting in your system.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, essentially, like if you're drinking, if you're taking, I'll use nuun example. So two of our sport tablets, which is about, two of those is 600 milligrams of sodium in there between both of those. If that's kind of your normal consumption throughout the day, throughout the training, perhaps 48 hours before, add in another tablet. Try to aim to get a little bit more electrolytes in there. 300 milligrams is perfect. And then that also increase your fluid up to that 16 ounces as well. So it's more or less like, there isn't like a prescription, right? Like this is the exact amount of electrolytes you're going to want to consume. It's more or less like continue on what you've been doing in training and maybe just add in one additional serving that week just to give your body a little bit more.
Kind of hang on here, see if anybody has any more questions. Thank you guys. Well, I've got this moment before the questions kind of a couple more trickle in here. Thank you guys for your time. This is great information. Hopefully everyone recognizes what a great panel we've got and how much great information was passed along. We try to do as good a job as we can to put so much information on on the website. So look on that website. You can see where all those aid stations are. You can see those flavors and all different products are on course. On there also, there's a table of some of these things that were said, the nutritional needs for you, for how long you're running, what your nutritional needs are, and then what all these products have. And so if you're able to do, connect the dots there, you're able to figure out a lot of this stuff by just looking at our website on the course information page. We'll see everyone at Run the Parkway as well. A great chance to practice some of these things. One quick question here before we go. Panel, we have a comments on ugali, which is cornmeal that's used for carbs instead of breads or pasta or other carbs. So maybe some carb alternatives, and ugali is one thing that's presented. Maybe Yvette or Roxanne, if one of you guys wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, ugali is a great option. And cornmeal, any type muesli, all those are really good options. It's a little bit more dense, but it's still gonna be nice carb rich. It doesn't need to be the traditional types of pastas and things like that. I would just stay away from the more edamame pastas and those kind of more unique innovations in the pasta and really just carbohydrate realm. I would go with the more simple ones, and you're going to be good to go.
Great. All right. Thank you guys. And like I said, if you guys have questions, you can always post them on the comments of the YouTube page. Thank you everyone for being here tonight.